and welcome to the first episode, this must be, of Cryptids, Creepies, and Conspiracies. It is a tentative title because I adore alliteration. I'm not really sure if we're going to change that, but I kind of think it's a fun name. So for this, I just want to give a little introduction of what to expect from these types of videos, and then we'll get into our first episode, which is the Fresno Nightcrawler. So, first of all, this is an audio type of show. Yes, there's a visual component here because I'm not super cool with movie making and editing, so there's not going to be anything that you can check out, but that's also intentional. The reason being is I like to listen to a lot of people's YouTube videos, and I'll usually listen to them while I'm doing something else in the house, such as doing the dishes, for example, or cooking. And a lot of times my phone is in another room and it's charging, or it's just to stay out of the water. And when I'm listening to it, sometimes I've had the YouTube host, I guess you would call them, they would put on a video and they'll say something like, so watch this clip, it'll show exactly what I'm talking about, and then you'll see the clip and there's no voiceover, narration, anything. So if I want to understand what's happening, I have to stop what I'm doing and go into the other room to check it out. And sometimes I'm just too busy with something, I can't put something down, and I just miss what it is. I have to go back and rewind it, and it's just really annoying for me. So I'm not going to sit here and do that for you guys. Also, I know that some people have trouble with flashing lights. I'm one of them. You guys might be familiar a bit with my migraine glasses. I do recommend yellow tinted glasses if you get migraines, but I did decide to get a fancier pair than my other kind. I know some people have problems with those kinds of flashing lights. That might happen in some of the videos, especially those that have electrical interference that they allege. And also some people just get creeped out. And for people watching this at night, I don't want to give you nightmares. So for all of those reasons, we're not going to be watching any clips. Of course, I do encourage you to check these out on your own if you like doing that sort of thing, but I'm just going to be describing it to you. So what is a cryptid, what is a creepy, and what is a conspiracy? So for the purposes of this show, a cryptid is basically a maybe animal. It's an undocumented animal. Cryptids are things that we see or allege that we see or misidentify in some cases, but there is no allegation or claim that there's anything that's breaking the laws of physics. Okay, so for example, Bigfoot or a Yeti, or I think they're called swamp apes in the southeastern United States, and I think they exist pretty much anywhere where a woodland area would exist. The stories of them do exist. These would be something like a woodland ape. Is that within the realm of possibilities? Absolutely. A primate in the woods, not that crazy of a concept. Something like that would be a cryptid. This is an animal that breathes, eats, sleeps, drinks water, reproduces in a fashion that is not uncommon to other types of animals similar to it. That would be a cryptid. But if somebody says something like Bigfoot is an interdimensional traveler who communicates with me about events of the future through psychic means, that would not be a cryptid. That would be some kind of paranormal claim. And that's what I'm going to fall for creepies. Creepies are going to be anything that is paranormal. What would that be? Paranormal is a word that gets thrown around a lot and is not really good for, isn't really well defined. So for the purposes of this show, paranormal is something that falls outside of our understanding of physics. If it's connected with some kind of technology, such as aliens visiting Earth in a ship equipped with warp drive and abducting you so they can make alien-human hybrid offspring, that would not be something I consider paranormal because that would have a scientific explanation. It's outside of our understanding of technology, but it is with the assistance of science or technology of theirs. That's not something I would consider paranormal. And just to let you know, I would consider aliens, for the purposes of this show, I would consider aliens to be cryptids because they would be an animal type species, but just not in our planet. And I'm not saying that I believe that aliens have come to Earth to abduct people. I'm not saying that. What I would consider paranormal would be a consciousness existing without a brain. Something like a ghost, a spirit, a demon, a jinn, gods, demigods, angels, something like that that defies our understanding of what an animal, that includes us, should be able to do. A human should not be able to fly unassisted. So if you're able to do that, I would consider that paranormal. If you're able to do that as an innate ability, if you're able to do that with like a jetpack, I wouldn't consider that paranormal. That's just technology. I think I also want to talk about any kind of urban legends that are really creepy, as in just frightening. I think that we might do that. I'm not sure yet. For conspiracies are just plans that other people aren't really aware of, or they should have been aware of it, but they aren't. This does not mean get your tinfoil hat on, but it can mean get your tinfoil hat on. I think a great example would be the somewhat recent woke quote-unquote posts about people saying that the United States government, can listen to your cell phone calls even when your cell phone is off. And some people say, no, that's just crazy tinfoil hat stuff. And some people say, no, man, you just believe everything you're told, da-da-da-da-da. I was around when the Patriot Act was introduced. That was part of the Patriot Act. So to me, that was a bit surprising, because that's not even a conspiracy, but now it's being like repackaged as a conspiracy. Types of conspiracy theories that I am interested in talking about more would be things like anti-vaxxers, any kind of church activity, especially like hiding any kind of illegal activities that a church or a cult might do. Something like that I would be interested in covering, but of course let me know what you're interested in. That being said, the first thing I want to talk about is the most recent thing I learned the name of. Now, I have seen videos and animated GIFs, yes, GIFs, of this cryptid, but I never knew the name, and the name is the Fresno Nightcrawler. Fresno because Fresno, California, and Nightcrawler, I'm not really sure why it's called a Nightcrawler. Usually when you say Nightcrawler, you think something that crawls, such as those big delicious worms that you can use for fishing, or I guess you can kind of consider the X-Men Nightcrawler to kind of crawl, but I guess he sort of moves more with a bamf revolution, but I would still consider that not walking upright. If you've seen these videos, they are CCTV or security cameras, depending on which verbiage you use. But they're CCTV footage at night of these things that appear to be very white and tall. The way that they're described is that it appears they have a head with no torso and very, very, very long legs. They are walking somewhat slowly, approximately 4 feet tall. I'm not 100% sure what that is with meters, what a meter and like 133 centimeters maybe. And they are just walking on two legs, two very long legs. I don't see that when I watch those videos. I do see a torso. I agree that it appears it has no facial features. There's some kind of head. There are long legs, but I definitely see a torso. I don't see any discernible shoulders, however. When I first saw this, I thought this is obviously a hoax, obviously. But as more and more people were talking about it, I thought it was sort of easy just to dismiss it as, oh, this is a hoax, and I just say it's a hoax because that's how I feel. If I can demonstrate that it's a hoax, that's one thing, but just to say, oh, I'm dismissing it as a hoax because it just looks to me to be fake, that's not very descriptive or helpful. What I do think, if I were to analyze it, is that these are... I don't know how controversial this is. If you look up Fresno meth addiction, there is a problem with meth addiction in Fresno. People that are addicted to methamphetamines, they find that meth tends to kill your appetite and you tend to be a bit more active, which both of those combined, you end up losing weight. There are also accounts of people that do meth so they can work more, especially in places like developing countries. I believe I was reading an article about it, I think it was in the Philippines, and people were doing meth so they could work longer hours, so they could make more money. So it just kind of gives you energy. You're up at hours when other people aren't, and you're not doing anything necessarily violent. You're just kind of up. You can get violent, just depends on the situation and the person, but you just tend to be up, wandering around. You can be oblivious to your surroundings. You might interact with them, you might not. Meth will produce thinness, which might explain the thinness of the legs in the Fresno Nightcrawler. The other thing, however, is that for some people they do get very hot, but for other people, meth tends to make them quite cold. And that was the thing that I noticed that was a bit strange about the Fresno Nightcrawler. And the reason I thought, oh, this is obviously a hoax, is because it looks like if you ever wear really loose sweatpants and you pull them up really high and you stick your arms into the legs of the sweatpants and you kind of walk sort of tilting, you're twisting your torso as you're walking, that's how it looks. And I would say the reason that this happens at night, and the reason the people are so skinny, and the reason they're walking around with their arms tucked into their pants, I would say all three of those things could be explained by meth addiction. That doesn't mean it's meth addiction. That doesn't mean that the Fresno Nightcrawler is not a true cryptid, but it does mean that I think the most likely explanation is a meth addict. Interestingly, if you look up Fresno meth addiction, one of the first results that you get in Google is a mother who had been photographing her son's descent into meth addiction. And one of the first two photos that you'll find is her son crouched, hunched over, and his hands are tucked into, or his arms are tucked into his shirt. It's not easy to see if they're just in his shirt, crossed over his stomach, or if they're in his shirt and down his pants, but they are tucked away. And I thought that was so interesting that I was trying to find, could meth addiction produce some kind of figure like this? And literally the second image that I looked up was exactly what the Fresno Nightcrawler would look like. So why doesn't it have a face, you might wonder? Well, it's because CCTV, especially at night or especially during an extra bright day when there's a lot of white reflective surfaces, as you guys probably know, not the greatest stuff. I mean, for those of you that can see me, I am very white looking right now. I am not this white, and if we actually change the hue back there, it'll change my color. You can see my skin color is warming up, and as we change the hue back down, my skin color gets whiter. Unless you have an excellent camera and you have a photographer that knows exactly what they're doing and how to balance the highlights and highlights and lowlights, you're going to end up with a situation where sometimes a face gets washed out. A perfect example, other than what I just showed you, would be trying to take a photograph of the moon. You can see a lot of the craters on a moon, and it's really good detail, but if you try to take a photograph of the moon, a lot of times you end up with black sky and then just this white shining circle. It almost ends up looking like the sun because it's just this single white shining color. Even though the moon, of course, has visible craters from Earth, you can't pick that up with most cell phone cameras. You really have to know what you're doing in terms of like aperture and f-stop and that sort of thing. So I think that's all that it is. Just some meth addicted individuals wandering around at night, and they're cold. The interesting thing about it to also support this is that this is a recent cryptid, and the meth addiction is also a recent phenomenon. By recent, I mean that it's not something like the chupacabra or the skinwalker or those things that have a very, very old tradition of the people that are native to this areas, this was part of their folklore and part of their accounts, and that early settlers from other areas also encountered this. I'm talking, this is a recent thing that has been reported within the last decade or so, and it's the same situation with the rise in meth addiction. And of course, video cameras. If you see somebody that is doing that visually, it's like seeing the moon. You're going to see the detail. You're not going to assume, oh, this is some kind of cryptid or paranormal thing that I'm witnessing. You're going to say, this is a person with their hands stuck down their pant legs. That's it. Maybe they're cold, maybe they're being silly, whatever. But if you capture this on a security camera that doesn't really balance out that white or that highlight and low light, you're going to end up with something like this. That's why I think it's a recent cryptid. On top of this, there's no real animal behavior to it. People have noticed that the Fresno Nightcrawler appears to be pretty calm. It doesn't really interact with a lot of stuff. It's seen just kind of walking across the field of view of the security camera. It doesn't appear to be attacking anything. It doesn't appear to be sniffing around. It doesn't have those behaviors that an animal might have, where it's very hesitant in an open area. It might be sniffing, stopping, looking, and being aware of itself. It just appears kind of oblivious to what's happening, just like somebody who is high would be oblivious to what's happening as well. So I think the Fresno Nightcrawler is a group of people that are addicted to meth, wandering into areas that happen to have security footage that doesn't really balance out the highlight and low light, and you end up with this very whitewashed looking creature type thing. They're really interesting to see. Now I know some of you might be thinking, I've seen some of this footage and some of them really don't look like they have a torso. The explanation for that would just be a stretched image on the camera. The camera might have some kind of different kind of lens on it, or just the way that it's hitting the angle of it. For example, I had a photo done recently with my camera phone. Somebody else took it for me, and my head was like twisted up on one corner. Not severely, not to the point that you would think the camera absolutely screwed up, but it's just enough that it's noticeable, but you think, this is just a problem with the camera lens. That's it. So in those cases where it appears that the Fresno Nightcrawler might not have a torso, or the torso might be very short, I think it's just one of those situations. Another concept of it, or another explanation, would be they are wearing robes. When I showed a friend of mine some of this footage, they said, it just looks like people wearing robes. I didn't tell them what it was. I just said, what do you think of this? This is something I found online. Some people think it's creepy. What do you think of it? And they said, it looks like people wearing robes. So that might be it as well. It might be some people wearing loose-fitting clothing to help kind of feel a little bit warmer. I don't know if you guys have been in desert areas, dry areas, or places like Southern California at night, but it can get kind of cold. So it's not outside the realm of possibilities for sure. So that's my explanation of it. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and if you guys have any questions or you would like me to make any clarifications on what I mean by cryptids, a creepy, or a conspiracy, or if you have any particular favorites that you would like to have talked about here, please let me know in the comment section below. You can also check out my Discord and Patreon, but I don't really have a way to sign off from this yet, so I guess I'll see you later.